Hello, Pranav. Could you tell us a bit about yourself and what exactly do you do at NAB?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that intro. I think you kind of summarized it there. Right now, I'm a consultant data scientist working in the climate analytics team at NAB. And I just graduated from Melbourne Uni with a Bachelor of Science, and I majored in data science. I've had quite a long degree. I mean, in my third year, I sort of got the internship, and then realized that it was sort of full time. So I thought I can't do 4 units a semester, so I kind of underloaded that across a couple of years. In between that process, I moved on to a permanent role at NAB, and that's where I'm at the moment.
That's really good. Before we get into like the nitty gritty, do you enjoy your work at NAB?
Yeah, I think NAB's a great place to work at. I think I got lucky in the work that I do. I work at climate analytics, and for the first, I guess, 1.5 years at NAB, especially when I was an intern, I worked in customer outcomes, analytics, which is essentially how can we look at the ways in which our customers are engaging with our products and our bank, and how can we improve it for the customer. So it wasn't really a profit-minded analytics division. It was sort of for the betterment of the customer, and that came through legislature and stuff like that. So Royal Commission in 2017, etc. And then I moved to climate analytics. So climate analytics is super fun. Whenever I talk about it, introduce it, everyone's like, what is climate? And what does it have to do at a bank? Which I'm sure, as you said, we can get into the details a bit later on. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect. So how did you find out about internship opportunities? Did you search on websites like Grad Connection, or did you have referrals at NAB?
Yeah, so I did have a referral. I had a friend who was doing the same internship program, but was the cohort before me. And so they kind of just told me, you should try and apply. And then I did apply. I don't think I put the referral in, but that's how I heard about it. I think I just found it on LinkedIn. But I had to hear it from another person, and then I searched it up and saw that the application window was, I think there was a week left to go, so I kind of rushed my application in. Got pretty lucky.
That's fair. What was the interview process like? How many interviews were there, and what did you have to do for those interviews?
Yeah, so I think at that point in time, the internship program was sort of this full-time thing. It wasn't just a summer vacation year, and they were hiring people from university. They didn't really care whether you had a degree yet or not. I think one of the screen tests was whether you were either a graduate or pursuing a degree. The process was sort of like I applied. I did a Codility or some sort of, I think, a HackerRank test where it was just a coding question. I think it was basic Python, so it was pretty simple. And then I progressed. So after the online assessment, I went to directly to the interview stage. So it was application successful, online assessment was successful, and then the final interview. I actually had 2 separate interviews for 2 different roles at NAB, and initially that was for a data engineering role. So the interviews were successful, and that's how I got the role.
That's nice. How long do you think the entire interview process was?
So I think because I applied a bit late, they wanted to rush. They wanted to get everything done as quick as possible. So I think all in all, it took about a week from when I submitted my application to when I heard back. But I wouldn't say that's a general case. I think mine was a bit of an exception because they were trying to, ramp up all the offers and get it all done with at that time. So, yeah.
That's nice. I've also got another question. So I've also been applying to internships, and I'm assuming a lot of other students have been applying to internships as well. Is it normal to get rejected from a lot of these internship applications?
Yeah, 100% normal, right? And it's not just an Australian thing. You're seeing this across the world. The general consensus for students is that the job market right now is not the best. Obviously, the direction that things are heading is more of automation and redundancies rather than new roles. And so as the industry kind of takes a different turn, we'll see different roles pop up. I'm sure it'll be, that the market will get better. But I think it's completely normal to get rejected. I think there's a lot of, advice going around. I think students and people, getting mixed opinions on how to apply and what to put on their resume, things like that. And I guess because of this, it can lead to very homogeneous applications, which kind of all look the same and not much really stand out. There could be disconnects from what the employer puts on the role purpose statement or the description of the role to what actually is useful for the employer. So because of that disconnect, because there's these general application, statements and requirements, it causes this kind of gap. There could be many such reasons. I think the number one reason, though, is the job market. I think that's,
Yeah, that's fair. That's understandable. And you earlier mentioned that you had to underload your studies.
Yep.
And based on your experience, when students are studying, doing the degree, would you recommend extending the degree and focus and get them to focus more on gaining industry experience?
Yeah, look, I gotta be pretty careful here, right? Because I'm not saying that the path I took is the right way, right? And you'll find that what I did, a lot of people, that's the minority case relative to the general way to go about things. And I've seen people that they finish their degree in 3 years or 4 years, depending on your course, and they kind of just get a role right after. And within, I guess, 2 years, it's they've caught up to those that have underloaded and started working a bit earlier. So I would not go out of my way to recommend it. But what I will say is that there's always going to be a delay in terms of industry requirements and what the skills that you really need to have versus what you're taught in these courses, right? And your units and your subjects, even in your assignments, which is supposed to be hands-on. Sometimes, you're doing things that, if you're doing a data science degree, the natural progression is being a data scientist in the industry, right? And so you would think that everything that you learn as a data science major in your undergrad will translate to being a data scientist in the industry. And that's hardly the case, right? The definition of what a data science is changing like every 3-4 months with new models coming out, with new libraries that you can just import, and you can make an entire data scientist almost redundant. Obviously that's the extreme case, but I wouldn't recommend I would say that industry experience is very important, but I would not go out of my way to recommend underloading if that doesn't suit your needs.
Okay, yeah, that's understandable. Do you think you developed your technical skills on your own, or was they from studying in uni? And what subject do you think was the most?
Yeah. It's a good question. I just want to add one point to the previous question about whether I'd recommend it, and then I'll obviously respond to this.
Yeah, sure.
One thing I want to say is this is a common thing that I'm hearing, that people want to underload and this is the right path. I had a really high workload while I was studying and while I was doing working full time at the same time, in a corporate job where it's a 9 to 5, where there is a requirement to be in the office a certain number of days a week. It is very taxing. You do have to make a few sacrifices, and yes, you might only be doing 2 units a semester if you're underloading, but the units you're doing are still pretty full on, and they do require quite a bit of time, especially if you're a data science major, right, where you have these math-heavy, these math units in your year 3, level 3 math units and level 3 comp units. So, yeah, I would consider all aspects of what happens when you underload and take a full-time job. Now, to respond to your later question, which was about technical.
Let me just reiterate the question. So the question was, did you develop your technical skills on your own, or were you able to apply what you learned from your uni subjects?
Yeah, I think like, look, university is not useless, right? I don't want to give that impression.
Yeah.
But 100%, and this is just my opinion, right? People don't have to agree. My opinion is that what I've learned and what is useful to me in my day-to-day job is something that's not really, like, I would say maybe 30 or 40% of it is taught at uni. Like very useful things like how to work with people. I think applied data science, your final core unit, if you're a data science major, was useful. Like you learn, I guess, agile methodologies and, Scrum ceremonies and things like that, which you have to deal with when you're working in a larger team, especially in an enterprise or a corporate company. You have to, other skills like code collaboration and, things like this is also taught at universities. And then the technical hard skills like, actually machine learning and the math that you use and data exploration, data analysis, all of this stuff is useful. I think what tends to happen is in university, they don't stress enough about database systems. And, I think that is probably, if it was taught as well as it could be, and if we had another unit that, expanded on database systems, then I think that would be probably the most important, 2 units that I would have hoped to have when I was doing my degree. And I did do database systems, but I didn't learn much from it. As soon as I started my internship, I had to learn SQL, and I had to learn how to work with SQL and PySpark and Spark to handle such large amounts of data and create these data pipelines that I can use myself as a data scientist or a data analyst or help the team out as well. So there is a big disconnect, and that's just how I feel. You do need to go out of your way to learn your own projects and learn your own skills and really try to understand what's useful in the industry. So yeah.
So would you say it's important to take on personal projects to sort of like boost your resume or your CV to make yourself more attractive to
employers? Yeah, I mean, look, I am hesitant looking at it that way. Doing something to boost your CV or your resume or your LinkedIn, as an experience or as a project. There's a lot of grifting that people do. I'm sure like everyone that's aware of this term has seen it around students at UniMelb, people in the industry, who are just starting on, people who have been in the industry for a while. I've seen this, and this is talked about as well, that a lot of people just claim to have done work, and they present it in a certain way on their resume and in their LinkedIn. And when you ask them about it, and when you really pressure them about it, you realize they just vibe coded the whole thing. They don't really know how it works, right? Now, that's not to say that when you do work on something, you shouldn't, put some effort into presenting it properly, putting it on a resume properly, putting it on LinkedIn or kind of explaining this, what you've done, taking some time out to actually do that work. That's not to say that, right? But when and doing personal projects is 100%, something that I believe will put you at an advantage, not from a CV perspective, but from a perspective that you just know more, right? Like you've worked on stuff that's not just handed to you in a unit assignment or something like that. You're doing stuff, you're building the skill of agency, which is really important, like getting it done yourself, finding out a problem, coming up with a solution yourself, right? There's no marking criteria. There's no set marking criteria. So it's kind of just your own work, right? And then you start to take ownership of this work. You don't really have a hard deadline, so you're not pressured by a deliverable. You're just trying to learn as much as you can. And then, sure, once you've done that, you can spend a bit of time putting it on your resume and your LinkedIn and your GitHub and whatever. But I think if you look at that side first, like just that curiosity, the agency, those skills, if you just look at it from that angle, yeah, it's 100% important to work on your own projects.
Yeah, that's interesting. And yeah, I think I agree with you. I feel like sometimes CVs and resumes, they can be superficial. People they sort of like try to find their way around getting less work done, but trying to have those credentials?
I think just to respond to that, I think I don't want to. I'm not saying that resumes and CVs and LinkedIn isn't good and you shouldn't spend time on it. Like, I think the concept of a resume is really important, right? Because you do have to learn the skill of summarizing yourself into, a document or a piece of paper or something that, people can read and not, get bored of, and it's not just like a bore. So I think the skill of summarizing that down, putting your best accomplishments and putting exactly what you're curating your resume. That's also an art and a skill that you should learn. So yeah, like there is some superficial elements to it, but it is very important to have a strong resume and a CV that presents who you are and the projects you've done. So,
Yep. So you work full-time now at NAB. So I just wanted to ask you, how did you assimilate from working as an intern to landing a full-time role?
Yeah, I think, part of it's luck. Good opportunities, good manager, good team, good culture, right? And this culture of growth. Now, I think that, it was definitely a step up, right? I've been at NAB it'll come close to 3 years at the end of this year, right? I've been at NAB for 3 years, I can say, and it's been a crazy journey, right? Like, I can think back to how I started. I didn't know anything. Like, I was literally a baby coming in. I didn't know anything. I had crazy imposter syndrome. I had no idea why they even I didn't know anything technically, right? I was just coming off my second year, and I'm seeing first and second years today, right? I work with some of them on some other projects, and they're way smarter than I was, right? Way more accomplished. I wasn't all that when I came into NAB as an intern, but I had this curiosity, this desire to learn, and this urgency to provide some value to my team, even though I don't know anything yet. I'll figure it out later, right? And I did come with that kind of mindset, and I didn't tell myself that. It's just something that I always felt, and so that's what took me, right? The projects I worked on, slowly I had this desire of working on it myself, to build that independence, that agency that I can actually, if you give me some requirements, I know what to do to solve it. I know who to speak to, where the documentation is, what technologies we use, what I guess coding patterns and architecture patterns that we and coding standards and all of that stuff, right? I can figure it out myself and I can go and do it. So that was a gradual thing. I don't expect. I'm lucky that my internship was quite a long one, because that definitely helped me transition very naturally into a permanent role, and it set myself up. I believed in this idea that you could just go out and learn stuff and it'll come to you. So it was pretty cool journey.
Yeah, I also agree with that. I feel like sometimes the hardest thing is putting your foot into the door first, and from there you can learn to keep up with your environment. And what kind of specific skills or mindset have you demonstrated that helped NAB see you as a strong candidate?
Candidate is one thing. So do you mean candidate as in for an application, or just in general?
Just in general. Why did they what kind of skills or what qualities of yours did they see that they wanted you to stay and work full time?
I think, it's a good question. I mean, look, obviously I wouldn't know the full answer. I'm judging myself, but what I can tell you is from what I understand, I think this is probably it, right? I think I'm outgoing and I like to present and I take passion over my work, right? And that always translates positively within the team. You can advocate. You're your own self-advocate, right? That's what everyone always says. And you're your best advocate, right? So I learned to kind of speak to the work that I've done, present it to people, and I've done that constantly, so that I really built that skill. So that's I think that's one thing that comes to mind. The other thing is I've mentioned this already. It's agency, right? So this proactiveness, instead of being reactive and getting user stories or requirements assigned to you, you kind of seek out these opportunities to work and to do more complex things. And this is something that grads kind of complain about, is they're just sitting around, and all they're assigned is this Excel, like doing this, formatting this Excel spreadsheet in a particular way, or doing, these laborious tasks that are not really intellectually stimulating. And part of that is true, and that's just the bad hand that they've been dealt with regards to the team that they're in. Doesn't have to be the team's fault. It's just a situation. Part of it is something, that that they probably haven't done all they can to go out and learn enough to actually be of value so they can do more valuable things. So that agency, that proactiveness is very important. Also another thing, and I don't think I'm the best at this. I've seen people better than me, not just in the industry, but, at university, some of my friends as well. They're a lot better than I at this. And this is like systems thinking. So broadly what it is you're presented with a problem, right? But what tends to happen is that problem is not going to stay at that same state for a year, right? This problem might exist today, right? But 1 month later, there's a new variable or a new, wrench thrown into the mix, right? And you kind of have to adapt your solution. So when you initially confront the problem, right, you have to be able to kind of come up with a solution that's all encompassing of any problems that might come down in the future. Now, obviously you can't predict this, right? But there's solutions you can design, and, one example is modular frameworks or scalable frameworks or things like that, right? There's many ways this can take shape, but the solution you design has to kind of take into consideration that whatever problem set you see right now can change in the future, can change 1 year down the line, right? Someone might be, thrown into, building this with you. So how well can you onboard them onto this project? So the systems thinking of how can I develop the best system or best framework to solve this problem? That's something that's really important. And I think that, that is when you have that and when you really understand what's going on, it helps. And the last thing I would say is, for the longest time, people just call this being detail oriented, but I don't think it's that simple. I think for me, I just generally am uncomfortable when I don't know what's going on, right? A lot of the times, and look, sometimes you have to make a decision, right? You have to fight the right battle. It's really about like this uncomfortableness about, okay, what does this even mean, right? Get down all the way to the lowest level, the lowest granularity to understand every single concept, right? And then work your way up so you really know what's going on. And once you really know what's going on, people will be able to tell. And people will say that, yeah, you're the subject matter expert on this thing. And it's just that from that, constant scratch of, that constant itch of just wanting to know what's going on. So I think those are, if I was to, summarize or elaborate on what it is, I think that those would probably be it.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. I've never heard of systems thinking before, but I guess the more you know. So now let's just move on to like advice for students. So what is one thing like students should start doing right now if they want to land an internship?
Yeah, okay. Let me think. So I think that the best thing you'd need to do right now is, like, my opinion is, first of all, like, know what's happening in the industry. I think this is very general advice, right? People have said this before, and I'm just repeating it now. Just understand what's happening. Know the different companies that you're even applying to, right? Or like the general market of where you're at. Like, what are the companies in Australia? What are the biggest players in terms of, if you're going on a software side of things, you'd look at Atlassian and Canva and these big companies, right? Or maybe even for some quant firms doing some software for them. And then, if you're looking at data or data analytics, which companies have the biggest data analytics divisions, so just understand the industry. I think that's something that's, slightly lacking in students. That exposure or that case study kind of, research isn't I haven't seen that done much. And I didn't know anything until I actually, got the internship. So, learning from experience, I would say that. The other part is, like, there are tools that I just believe will give you an edge, right? Like, if you are very, very proficient in Python, you will it will help, and SQL, it will help you land any data related job. If you're proficient in, a lot of companies are transitioning to Databricks, including NAB. We're already kind of, in that transition period. That's a tool that really is something that I would learn. But yeah, I think it's build the skills of just agency and like learn how to like talk about yourself, right? Like build a self-awareness of where you stand, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses. Don't grift in interviews because interviewers can always sniff it out. Just be confident and yeah, that's, I guess, those are the first few thoughts that come to mind.
Yeah, no, that's fair. If you could go back, let's just wrap it up with one final question. If you could go back to your second or third year at uni, what would you do differently?
Yeah, look, I was never a good student, right? Like, I don't know if this makes me more relatable to a lot more people. I was a very, very bad student. I just couldn't figure out how to care about university that much, right? Like, I literally, all of my habits with regards to studying, were, I don't think they were not up to the mark, right? So if I would go back, I would actually probably spend a bit of time, and this probably has no impact on whether I got the role or not, because I got the role anyway, right? This was just my curiosity and my understanding of how things work, and data science is an actual field, and the math units and the computer, like the core comp sci units, I would go back and learn those and go into it more deeply. That's one thing I would do different, especially my second year, because I was just like studying full time then. I wasn't underloading. In my third year, honestly, like at that point I kind of checked out. I had a role. I was doing the bare minimum to sort of just get along, get just a decent grade, and those were my core units. So not a good time to adopt that, but I was just doing the bare minimum. The units I really liked were machine learning, AI. I remember FOA was really fun because I liked the project that was given to us. We had to we have to build a checkers engine or something in C, and learning C was quite full on, and I actually really liked it, but it is very annoying.
Right. On another thing I do want to talk about is your job at NAB. So can you walk us through what a typical day looks like for you at NAB?
Yep. So as you said, I'm a consultant data scientist. I just want to throw this in there that consultant is just the level. So that's what they call in NAB as a group 3. So group 3s I think are the most common level, and data science is the actual role that I'm doing, right? But there's an asterisk on that as well, right? I work in the climate analytics team, and there is some data science involved. There's some data analytics. There's some data engineering, right? It's all about creating analytics and insights with regards to the climate and climate data. So what I actually do is I work on this part at this part of climate analytics where we deliver some insights as part of the climate office to teams across NAB, right? So we work cross-functionally. Essentially, we look at, and let me think of how I can frame this, in a setting like this. But essentially, we look at the risk that that climate poses, either whether it's short-term acute climate events like disasters like cyclones and floods and things like that, and also long-term climate trends like the slow increase of temperature or the slow decrease in rainfall in a lot of parts across Australia, and we look at these trends and how they actually impact NAB customers, right? And how do they actually impact NAB customers? Well, the simple part is, let's say you're a NAB customer, right? And let's say you own a house. And when I say you're a NAB customer and you own a house, I mean you have a home loan with NAB, right? So your home loan, you borrowed some money from us to buy this house. And like all the home loans, we require collateral. And that collateral is your house. So in the event that, you default on your loan, and there's a whole process that you go through, we have entitlement of that collateral of that home, right? So we have a lot of customers, and these customers have home loans, and those collaterals, those homes, right, are at risk due to climate change, right? We've seen this Cyclone Alfred that happened recently. We've seen this in a lot of disasters. We've seen some flooding going on, right? Like this high flood risk zones, especially near rivers across, in New South Wales and Queensland as well. So that's one part. The other part is like long-term effects, right? So if you have a farm and you're an agribusiness and you take like loans with the bank, what happens when there's a sudden drought, right? Like how does your farm actually respond? How do your cattle respond to that drought, right? How do your crops do? And what happens to your productivity, right? And what happens to the profitability of your farm and your ability to actually sustain your business that you took out a loan for, right? So, and there's things that we can do to actually help customers and advise them of, there's all sorts of things that we look at. And you can actually find a lot of what we do in the annual climate report that NAB releases. And so there's obviously a lot of details in there about what we do. But essentially all of that, whatever you see in that report and more to come, we provide the data analytics and the analytics and the insights solution for that, right? So that's what our team does. Day to day, I work with Python, SQL, PySpark. I do a lot of geospatial analytics, a lot of dashboarding. I build a lot of dashboards and a lot of presentations to present to across different stakeholders that we have. We do work with a lot of a few data science and machine learning models, but honestly, data science is not about using the most up to date, the latest cutting edge ML model, right? It's about using solving problems using data and providing these insights, actionable insights that the business can use to that is in line with their strategy, right? Whether it's to help customers, whether it's for their own bottom line, whatever it is, right? That's what data science is. And a lot of people get caught up. They come in with this expectation that, I get to use, Random Forest or XGBoost or Light GB or whatever, right? But it's not that. Like, no one really cares. If that's what you're excited about, I can do, someone can do what you do with just one import of an sklearn package, right? What you're actually doing is understanding the data, helping people, helping advise business stakeholders, what's actually going on, what this data means. You've built some product, right? Show them what your product is, how they can use it for their own, their own goals and strategy, so that you can get funding as a team, right? So that's how it sort of works in industry. That's a broad oversimplification, but that's essentially what it is.
What's like one of the most recent projects you did that you were like? What's your most favorite project that you've done recently?
So I think the project that's gained a lot of traction is trying to understand and actually quantifying what's happened with these disasters that I talked about, how that's actually we go from an event actually happening and then boom, we have some insights about how customers are affected. And this is really important because this actually can help customers, right? We can say that, we know you've been affected and we can, help administer grants, and you can read the news about this. This is all public, right? So it's automating that process using data, using satellite imagery that we get from third-party vendors, all sorts of things, right? I would say that's probably the most exciting thing that I've been working on.
How much of your job involves, technical coding, and how much of it is actually communicating results to business partners?
Yeah, very good question. Look, the actual work is let's just say work is you build a new model, you get some output, and you solve a problem, right? That's probably 20 to 30%. The rest of it is, you're obviously on this target state strategic solution, right? Sometimes you're working in a certain environment, but the bank or your company wants you to move to another environment to get everyone onto that environment. So migration is a huge thing right now. Integrating different tools to kind of automate some processes, that's another thing. Communicating what you've done to stakeholders and presenting what you do is another thing. Making sure that your results, which are very high risk, right? High stakes, it can affect customers. So making sure your model results are validated, are correct, coming up with strategies to test that, to present that evidence, to get it approved, right? That's another thing. Onboarding colleagues, helping colleagues work with you, especially new colleagues. That's another thing. So it's all these things that are included, right? And you can see how, your linear stats models, which people think is like everything, right? Like, oh my God, for me to be a good data science, I just have to be really good at this one thing. No, you're not just a data science. You're working in an organization, right? You're working with other people. So you got to learn those skills too. So yeah.
If a student, like for example myself or say any other students studying data science right now, if they're interested in your industry of climate analytics, what sort of subjects or courses in Melbourne Uni would you recommend them to take?
So
like outside of the core subjects.
I'm not in the climate industry. I'm in the banking industry. I work in the climate division, right? That's kind of the data domain that I'm in, but it's very related to banking because I work in a bank. And the actual role is, data science and data analytics and data engineering, right? I wouldn't stress about learning about a certain domain, right? Like if you want to get into banking as a data scientist or data engineer, I don't know. I mean, if you learn the basics about what banking is, you don't really need a course to learn all that, right? And that's all you should know about a domain, because you might know something about, banking or financial institutions or whatever area you want to work in. And then you actually get the role and you're like, that doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what that company is about, that specific company in the industry, right, that you work for. So I wouldn't spend that much time, especially not in courses to go into like these domains. I would just work on the hard skills and the soft skills of like, that stuff that I mentioned earlier in this session. So, yeah.
Yeah. So you have shared a lot of knowledge, with us. I do want to ask you a more personal question though. How do you see your career progressing and where do you want to be in like a few years' time?
Yeah. So, we talked a bit about this before, but I'll say it again. I'm very interested, and when I say before, I mean off the record. I haven't said this yet. But like, I'm very interested in AI. I've always have been. And although I work a full-time job and I have graduated already, I take part in these projects at AI at DSCubed, and I apply some concepts I learned in the job at uni, and talking to people also interested in this stuff to build kind of like get this kind of startup vibe where you're building stuff from scratch, trying to solve this huge business problem. So in the future, right, for what it looks like for me is doing the best I can at my job, right, my full-time job, learning tools and technologies that have, downstream effects, not just in my job, but any pursuit that I want to take. And then also trying to get way deeper into the world of AI, applied AI, I should say. I'm not really interested in deep learning, how LLMs work from a math perspective. I know you're going to get LLM researchers and stuff in the future. I'm not really interested in that. I'm more interested in, how I can actually use this to automate, to create like these insanely powerful organizations, and deliver. And we just had by the way, just a quick plug, like AI at DSCubed, we just had a presentation and a showcase yesterday where we talked about a lot of the stuff that we built. And that was pretty exciting as well. So
shout out to AI at DSCubed.
Yeah. But yeah, in the future, like I don't really have any plans. I want to learn as much as I can. Honestly, I don't know that much, right? I now know a lot more. I'm more confident that I don't know a lot, right? If that makes sense. And that tends to happen. There's like this curve, I forgot what it's called, but you reach a point where you're like, wow, I don't know anything, right? And I think I've reached that stage. So I want to like kind of, climb that mountain, get better at what I do, and we'll see what happens.
Well, that's amazing, Pranav. Thank you for sharing such an honest and insightful journey. From interning to NAB and now working full-time, all while studying at Melbourne Uni. It's stories like these that help other students see pathways into data science more clearly. Well, that's it for today's episode. Thank you for joining us, and we hope Pranav's story has inspired you to take that next step towards your own career in data science. We'll be back soon with more advice from students, alumni, and industry professionals. So stay tuned and keep building your data science journey.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me, man.